The ancient data crystal flickered between Taurus's fingers, its surface covered in symbols nobody had bothered to translate in over 1,000 years. Most archivists at the Grand Repository treated old records like decorations, pretty things to catalog and forget. Taurus treated them like mysteries waiting to solve. He pressed the crystal into the reader and watched lines of text scroll across his screen. The translation program struggled with the dialect, spitting out fragments that made no sense. References to a species called humans. Coordinates to star systems that existed in empty space. Records of colonies that had no archaeological evidence. Another myth file, his colleague Renus said, glancing over his shoulder. You waste time on fairy tales. Taurus ignored her. Something about these files felt different. They contained too much detail for simple stories. Exact dates, specific coordinates, names of ships, and their crew manifests. Myths didn't bother with such precision that he dug deeper into the database, searching for anything related to humanity. The results shocked him. Thousands of files, most of them corrupted or marked as fiction. Stories about warriors who survived without atmosphere processors. Beings who ate foods that would poison other species. Creatures who healed from injuries that should have killed them. Then he found the incident reports point 3,000 years ago. Something called the silence had occurred. Entire star systems went dark overnight. No distress signals. No survivors. Just emptiness where thriving colonies had existed. The Galactic Concordat's official records blamed a natural disaster, some kind of stellar phenomenon that sterilized dozens of worlds simultaneously. But in the corrupted files, Taurus found a different story. The disaster wasn't natural. It was deliberate. A coalition of species had attacked human settlements, driving them from known space. The humans had fought back, but outnumbered and overwhelmed, they retreated into the darkness beyond the galactic rim. The files called that region the Dead Zone. Taurus leaned back in his chair, mind racing. If humans had been real, where did they go? The Dead Zone was exactly that, dead. No stars, no resources, nothing but empty void. No species could survive there for 3,000 years. Unless the legends were true, he compiled his findings into a report and sent it directly to Counselor Brenna, bypassing normal channels. Breaking protocol could cost him his position, but this discovery was too important for bureaucratic delays that Brenna's response came within the hour. She wanted to meet immediately. The counselor's office overlooked the archives, floor-to-ceiling windows displaying the endless rows of data storage. Brenna stood at the window, her scaled skin reflecting the soft light. She belonged to the Corvin species, known for their logical minds and political cunning. You believe humans were real, she said without turning around. Not myths. The evidence supports it, Taurus replied. Too many details match across independent sources. Too many records from different species telling the same story. And you think they're still alive. Out there in the dead zone. I think it's possible. Brenna finally turned to face him. Do you know why we call the dead zone archivist? Because every ship we've sent, they're never returned. Every probe goes silent. Whatever exists in that darkness doesn't want to be found. Then maybe we should stop looking, Taurus said, and start listening. 3 days later, the Concordat Council authorized an expedition. Not a military force, but a research fleet. 3 ships, minimal weapons, maximum sensors. Their mission was simple. Investigate the coordinates Taurus had found in the corrupted files and report back. Captain Drell commanded the expedition. He was a career officer who followed orders without question, which made him perfect for a mission nobody expected to succeed. His ship, the Seeker, led the small fleet toward the Dead Zone's border. Taurus watched their departure from the archives, tracking their progress through the sensor network. The ships moved through normal space without incident, passing the last inhabited systems and pushing into the empty regions beyond. Then they crossed into the Dead Zone, and their signals vanished. Taurus expected this. Every mission into that region ended the same way. But this time, he kept monitoring, waiting for something different. 3 weeks passed. The council prepared to write off the expedition as another failure. Brenna called Taurus to her office, disappointment clear in her voice. Your humans are still myths, she said. We've lost 3 ships chasing ghosts. Before Towers could respond, alarms blared throughout the archives. Emergency broadcasts flooded every screen. Border Station Vigilance, the furthest outpost in Concordat space, was transmitting a priority alert. Unknown ships approaching. Multiple contacts. Large signatures. Towers pulled up the sensor data and felt his breath catch. The ships were massive, each one larger than anything in the Concordat fleet. Their designs were brutal and efficient, all angles and armor with no decorative elements. They moved in perfect formation, heading directly toward civilized space, and they were coming from the dead zone. "Give me Commander Grevik," Brenna ordered, her voice tight with tension. "Now!" The commander's face appeared on screen, his usual calm replaced by barely controlled fear. Behind him, his crew worked frantically at their stations. "Counselor, we've attempted first contact protocols. Standard languages, mathematical sequences, everything in our database. They're not responding. Keep trying," Brenna said. "Do not engage unless fired upon." Hours crawled by as the unknown fleet approached. More ships kept appearing from the dead zone, adding to their numbers. Towers counted them obsessively. 50 ships, 100, 200. They kept coming. Then, finally, a response. The transmission was in a dialect so ancient the archive's translation program nearly rejected it. But Towers recognized fragments from his research, pieces of the language humans had used 3,000 years ago. The message was simple and direct. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth Alliance Defense Fleet. We've come home." Towers looked at Brenna, seeing his own shock reflected in her expression. The counselor's hands trembled as she gripped her desk. "Humans," she whispered. "They're real, and they remember." Outside, more ships emerged from the darkness, their weapons powered down, but their presence unmistakable. Humanity had returned, and they'd brought an entire fleet with them. The myths had teeth after all. Commander Grevik had spent 20 years at Border Station Vigilance without seeing anything more threatening than smugglers and lost cargo haulers. His posting was supposed to be quiet, a place where officers neared retirement and avoided complications. That comfortable certainty shattered the moment his sensors detected the human fleet. The ships hung in space like predators, their dark holes absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Each vessel bristled with weapons systems Grevik couldn't identify. His tactical officer had given up trying to classify their armaments after the 15th unknown configuration. "Sir, they're hailing us again," his communications officer reported. "Same message. They want to talk." Grevik straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put them through." The screen flickered to life, showing a human for the first time in 3,000 years. Captain Rodriguez looked remarkably ordinary. No fangs, no claws, nothing that matched the legends. Just a middle-aged being in a crisp military uniform, with dark eyes that had seen too much. "Commander Grevik," Rodriguez said, his translated words coming through clearly now. "Thank you for your patience. I understand the situation is unprecedented." "That's an understatement, Captain." Grevik kept his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "You claim to represent Earth. Our records indicate humans went extinct millennia ago. Your records are incomplete." Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. "We didn't go extinct, Commander. We were driven out." "By whom?" "Species that currently hold senior positions in your Concordat. The Dravish Empire led the coalition that attacked our worlds. They destroyed 3 of our colonies without warning, killed billions of our people, and forced the survivors to flee beyond the galactic rim." Grevik had studied history. The Dravish were one of the Concordat's founding members, respected for their military traditions and diplomatic influence. The idea that they'd committed genocide seemed impossible. "That's a serious accusation," Grevik said carefully. "It's documented fact." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Your archivist, Taurus, has already found evidence in your own records. The Dravish tried to erase us from history, but they couldn't destroy every file, every witness, every truth. If what you say is real, why return now? Why not stay hidden?" Rodriguez's expression hardened. "Because hiding isn't living, Commander. We spent 3,000 years building new homes in the darkness, raising generations who never saw a proper sun, teaching our children about worlds they'd never walk on. Every human alive today carries the weight of exile. We're tired of running. Behind Grevik, his tactical officer whispered urgently, "Sir, more ships are arriving. I'm counting 400 now. 400 warships, each one a technological mystery. Each one potentially more advanced than anything the Concordat could field." Grevik felt sweat forming on his skin. "What are your intentions?" he asked. "We want what was stolen from us. Recognition. Rights. A place in the galaxy that remembers we exist." Rodriguez paused. "And we want justice for the lost worlds. The Concordat Council will need to discuss this." "We understand. We're giving them 48 hours to respond. After that, we'll take matters into our own hands." The transmission ended, leaving Grevik staring at a blank screen. He immediately opened a channel to Concordat's Central Command, knowing his report would trigger chaos throughout civilized space. On the Corvin homeworld, Counselor Brenna assembled an emergency session. The council chamber filled with representatives from 847 species, all talking at once, all demanding answers. High Commander Sethrak of the Dravish Empire stood at the speaker's podium, his massive frame radiating authority. The Dravish resembled bipedal reptiles, scaled and powerful, with crests that flared when they felt threatened. Sethrak's crest was fully extended. "These humans lie," he declared, his voice booming through the chamber. "They claim persecution, but the truth is far different. 3,000 years ago, humanity spread across the galaxy like a plague. They took worlds others had claimed. They consumed resources without thought for sustainability. They refused to join any coalition, any alliance. They were chaos incarnate. Do you have evidence of this?" Brenna asked from her seat. Sethrak activated a holographic display, showing footage from ancient archives. Humans in military armor fighting on alien worlds. Explosions and destruction. Cities burning. "This is what humanity brought to the galaxy," Sethrak continued. "Violence, disorder, expansion without limit. The coalition that opposed them did so in self-defense. When they refused to cease their aggression, stronger measures became necessary." "You mean genocide," Taurus said, standing from the archivist section. His voice carried despite his youth. "You destroyed entire colonies, including civilians. Children. You erased a species from existence. We eliminated a threat." Sethrak's eyes fixed on Taurus with cold fury. "And now that threat has returned, stronger and more dangerous. Look at their fleet. 400 warships of unknown capability. They could destroy us all." Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. Several species representatives nodded in agreement. The human fleet was intimidating, undeniably so. "We should strike first," Sethrak declared, "while we still have numerical advantage. The Dravish Armada stands ready to defend the Concordat." "And if you're wrong?" Brenna challenged. "If these humans truly seek peace, then why bring warships?" Sethrak spread his arms, addressing the entire council. "Peaceful species don't arrive with fleets. They don't make demands. They don't give ultimatums. These humans are preparing for war, and we must meet them with strength." The council erupted in argument. Some species supported immediate military action. Others urged caution. A few suggested trying diplomatic contact before resorting to violence. Taurus watched the chaos and felt history repeating itself. 3,000 years ago, fear and propaganda had convinced the galaxy to attack humanity. Now, the same pattern was emerging. The same lies. Dressed in new clothing, he left the chamber and returned to the archives, diving back into the corrupted files. There had to be more evidence, something conclusive that would prove the truth about humanity's exile. What he found changed everything. Hidden in the deepest layers of data, protected by encryption that had degraded over millennia, Taurus discovered the original coalition communications. Messages between Dravish commanders planning their attack. Strategic assessments that openly discussed eliminating human competition for resources. Orders to destroy colony ships, including those carrying refugees, the Dravish hadn't acted in self-defense. They'd acted in greed. Humans were successfully colonizing worlds the Dravish couldn't settle themselves. Rather than accept competition, the Dravish chose extinction. Towers compiled the evidence and transmitted it directly to Brenna, marking it priority emergency. Then he sent a copy to Captain Rodriguez as well. The humans deserved to know the truth had survived. Sethrak's private quarters aboard his flagship were decorated with trophies from 100 conquered worlds. He considered each one a testament to Dravish superiority, proof that his species deserved their place at the Concordat's peak. The humans had nearly ruined everything 3,000 years ago, and now they'd returned to threaten his empire again. He reviewed the evidence Towers had discovered with cold calculation. The ancient communications were damning, showing exactly what the Dravish had done and why. If this information spread through the Concordat, his species would face sanctions, possibly even expulsion. Worse, they might face justice. Unacceptable. Sethrak summoned his inner council, the military commanders who understood that power mattered more than truth. Together, they crafted a plan that would eliminate both threats simultaneously, the humans and the evidence against the Dravish. Mobilize the armada, Sethrak ordered. Every ship, every weapon. We move against the human fleet immediately. The Concordat hasn't authorized military action, one commander cautioned. The Concordat is paralyzed by debate. We act in their defense, whether they request it or not. By the time the council finishes arguing, the human threat will be neutralized. Sethrak's crest flared with satisfaction, and any archives containing inconvenient truths will be unfortunately destroyed in the crossfire. The Dravish armada assembled quickly, over 2,000 warships converging from across Concordat space. Allied species contributed their own forces, convinced by Sethrak propaganda that humanity represented an existential threat. The combined fleet dwarfed anything in recent history. Aboard the Perseverance, humanity's flagship, Captain Rodriguez watched the Dravish mobilization through long-range sensors. His command deck was quiet, each officer focused on their stations, awaiting orders. Admiral Okonkwo wants to strike first, his tactical officer reported. She argues we have the technological advantage and should use it before they fully assemble. Rodriguez shook his head. That's exactly what Sethrak wants. If we fire first, we prove his lies about human aggression. We become the villains in this story. With respect, sir, we might become dead heroes if we don't act. We didn't survive 3,000 years in exile by making stupid choices. Rodriguez pulled up communications. Give me Admiral Liu and Ambassador Wyatt. It's time for our ace. The holographic display activated, showing two other humans. Liu commanded the science fleet, focused on research and development. Wyatt led diplomatic operations, spending decades studying Concordat politics and culture. They're moving against us, Rodriguez stated simply. Sethrak won't wait for council approval. He can't afford to let us talk. Let's share the truth. He needs us dead and the archives destroyed. The evidence Tower has found changes the political equation, Wyatt said. Half the Concordat Council now questions Dravish credibility. If we can delay combat long enough, support might shift in our favor. Sethrak knows that too, Liu added, which is why he's forcing confrontation now. He's gambling that fear will override reason. Rodriguez nodded. Then we show them something more powerful than fear. Activate the beacons. It's time for our friends to arrive. Deep in the dead zone, ancient transmitters activated. Signals spread through the darkness, calling to those who'd waited generations for this moment. The refugee species who'd allied with humanity during their long exile. The displaced civilizations who'd found hope in human companionship. The forgotten peoples who'd built new lives in the void. They'd been waiting for the call to come home. Sethrak's fleet reached the border region where the human ships waited. The Dravish commander broadcast his ultimatum on all frequencies, ensuring maximum political impact. Human vessels, you are ordered to withdraw from Concordat space immediately. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. You have 1 hour. Rodriguez's response was simple and direct. No, The single word carried more weight than any speech. It conveyed 3,000 years of exile, countless generations born in darkness, billions of lives spent waiting for this moment. Humanity wasn't running anymore. Then you choose death, Sethrak replied. We choose to stand. Rodriguez opened a channel to every Concordat monitoring station, every council member, every species watching this confrontation unfold. 3,000 years ago, your predecessors drove us into darkness. They spread lies about our nature, our intentions, our worth. They tried to erase us from history. But we survived. We built new homes in the void. We raised our children to remember Earth, to remember the lost worlds, to remember what was stolen from us. His voice remained steady, carrying absolute conviction. We didn't return seeking revenge. We returned seeking recognition, the right to exist, the right to reclaim what belongs to us. If the Concordat meets us with violence, we will defend ourselves. But know this, we are not the aggressors. We never were. Sethrak cut the transmission and ordered his fleet forward. 2,000 Dravish and allied warships accelerated toward 800 human vessels. The numerical advantage seemed overwhelming. Then the reinforcements arrived. Space rippled as hundreds of new ships emerged from carefully positioned jump points. The VRYN brought their stealth fleet, vessels that could disappear from sensors mid-combat. The Kelter contributed warships equipped with weapons that disrupted enemy targeting systems. The Murati deployed carriers filled with advanced fighters. The Selden arrived with ships carrying technology that could disable engines without destroying hulls. Each species had their own grievances against the Concordat, their own reasons for exile or displacement. Humanity had found them in the darkness and offered alliance, friendship, shared purpose. Together, they'd build a coalition of the forgotten. The Dravish fleet suddenly faced not 800 ships, but over 1,500. And unlike Sethrak's forced alliance, this coalition fought with unified purpose and integrated tactics refined over centuries of joint operations. All ships, Rodriguez commanded. Remember the rules of engagement. Disable, don't destroy. Target weapons and engines. Leave crews alive. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to prove we're better than those who tried to erase us. The fleets met in the void between darkness and light, between past and future. The battle that followed would determine whether humanity reclaimed its place in the galaxy, or whether the Dravish would succeed in erasing them a second time. Rodriguez watched the tactical display and thought about all the humans who died waiting to see this moment. The children who never knew Earth. The elders who'd passed on stories of worlds they'd never see again. The countless generations who'd kept hope alive in the darkness. For the lost worlds, he whispered. Then the shooting started. The first Dravish missile salvo painted space with light, hundreds of warheads streaking toward the human coalition fleet. Standard Concordat doctrine favored overwhelming firepower, the belief that superior numbers could break any defense. They'd never fought humans before. Point defense grids activated across the human formation, tracking systems identifying and prioritizing threats within human precision. Laser batteries swatted missiles from space before they could reach their targets. The few warheads that slipped through hit shields that adapted in real time, reconfiguring their harmonics to absorb the specific energy signatures of Dravish weapons. Not a single human ship took damage in the opening exchange. Aboard his flagship, Sethrak watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. His finest weapons had been rendered useless in seconds. The humans hadn't even returned fire yet. Close to beam weapon range, he ordered, "Prepare boarding teams. We'll overwhelm them with numbers." The Dravish fleet accelerated, closing the distance. Their energy weapons would be more difficult to counter at point-blank range. Sethrak had won dozens of battles this way, using superior mass and firepower to crush opposition through sheer persistence. The human response changed his understanding of warfare forever. Instead of retreating or bracing for impact, the human ships separated into smaller tactical groups. Each group moved with perfect coordination, like schools of fish evading predators. They didn't flee, they repositioned, creating firing lanes and overlapping fields of fire that turned the Dravish advance into a killing field. When the humans finally opened fire, their weapons proved terrifyingly effective. Energy beams cut through Dravish armor plating like it didn't exist, not destroying ships, but surgically removing weapon systems, propulsion units, sensor arrays. Each shot was calculated for maximum effect with minimum casualties. Within 10 minutes, 50 Dravish warships floated dead in space, crews alive, but vessels completely disabled. The VRYNN stealth ships added to the chaos, appearing from nowhere to disable engines before vanishing again. Kelter jamming systems turned the Dravish fleet's own targeting computers against them, creating friendly fire incidents. Marathi fighters swarmed larger vessels, too numerous and too fast to track effectively. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Rodriguez watched from the Perseverance as his fleet systematically dismantled Sethrak's armada. Every move had been planned, every tactic refined through countless simulations. Humanity had spent 3,000 years preparing for this exact moment. "Sir, the Dravish are attempting to withdraw," his tactical officer reported. "Let them go if they choose," Rodriguez replied. "We're making a point, not conducting an extermination." But Sethrak's pride wouldn't allow retreat. The Dravish commander ordered his remaining ships forward, determined to achieve victory through sheer stubbornness. More vessels fell disabled, their crews rescued by human search and recovery teams before life support could fail. On Memorian, Taurus and Brenna watched the battle through sensor feeds, seeing firsthand what humanity had become during their exile. Every human ship fought with mechanical efficiency, no wasted movements, no unnecessary destruction. They could have annihilated the Dravish fleet in minutes. Instead, they were proving they didn't need to. "They're not fighting like warriors," Brenna observed. "They're fighting like surgeons. Precise, controlled, because they understand what extermination looks like," Taurus replied quietly. "They survived it. They're showing the galaxy they're better than those who tried to destroy them." The battle reached its turning point when Admiral Okonkwo's battle group penetrated the Dravish defensive formation and disabled Sethrak's flagship. The massive vessel went dark, weapons offline, engines dead. Sethrak found himself trapped in his own command deck, surrounded by disabled systems and frightened crew members. A transmission came through on emergency channels. Captain Rodriguez's face appeared on every screen. "High Commander Sethrak, your fleet is defeated. Over half your ships are disabled. The rest will join them if you continue fighting. Order your forces to stand down." Sethrak's crest flared with rage and humiliation. "You think you've won? You've only proven my warnings correct. You're dangerous, unstoppable. The Concordat will never accept you now." "We don't need acceptance bought through fear," Rodriguez replied. "We need recognition of truth. Your lies are exposed, Commander. The archives show what really happened 3,000 years ago. The galaxy knows you attacked us, not the other way around. They know you committed genocide because you couldn't compete fairly. Lies spread by a traitor archivist," Sethrak spat. "Truths documented by your own species, your own commanders. Your own words preserved in files you thought you destroyed." Rodriguez leaned forward. "You tried to erase us once. You failed. You tried again today. You failed again. How many more failures before you accept that humanity deserves to exist?" Before Sethrak could respond, new contacts appeared on sensors. Massive structures emerging from the dead zone, each one larger than anything currently in the battle space. Four enormous stations, mobile habitats capable of supporting billions. "You wanted to see what humanity built in exile," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying across all channels. "These are the sanctuary stations. Our homes. Our worlds. Everything we created in 3,000 years of darkness." The stations moved into formation behind the human fleet, their mere presence dwarfing every other vessel. They represented generations of work, countless lives spent building something permanent in the void. They were monuments to human stubbornness, the absolute refusal to surrender or die quietly. We built these because we had nowhere else to go, Rodriguez continued. We filled them with families, with children who grew up never seeing natural sunlight. We taught every generation about Earth, about the lost worlds, about what was taken from us. And we told them that someday we'd come home. Across Concordat space, billions watched the transmission. They saw the disabled Dravish fleet, proof that human military superiority wasn't myth. They saw the sanctuary stations, proof that humanity had not just survived but thrived in exile. They saw a species that had every reason to seek revenge, choosing instead to seek recognition. Public opinion began shifting. Species who'd supported Sethrak's aggressive stance started questioning their position. Council members who'd remained silent found their voices. The truth about the original genocide spread through news networks faster than the Dravish could suppress it. Brenna stood in the council chamber, watching her fellow representatives argue. Finally, she'd had enough. The Dravish committed genocide, she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. They tried to exterminate an entire species because of economic competition. They lied about it for 3,000 years. And now, when those survivors returned seeking only recognition, the Dravish tried to finish what they started. She looked directly at the Dravish delegation. I move for immediate sanctions against the Dravish Empire and the arrest of High Commander Sethrak for war crimes past and present. The motion failed. The Dravish still held too much political power, too many allies who feared change more than injustice. But the vote was closer than it should have been. The foundation of Dravish influence had cracked. Rodriguez received the vote results aboard the Perseverance and nodded grimly. Progress, but not justice. Not yet. Ambassador Wyatt studied the faces of Concordat council members through her screen, reading their expressions like a text. Fear dominated, mixed with confusion and growing doubt about everything they'd been told. The battle had shaken their worldview. Now came the harder part, changing hearts as well as minds. She opened a direct broadcast to every inhabited system in Concordat space, bypassing official channels. If the council wouldn't listen, the people would. My name is Wyatt. I represent humanity, though you've been taught my species died millennia ago. I'm here to tell you what exile truly means. Images appear behind her as she spoke. Historical footage from the evacuation, carefully preserved through generations. Families boarding colony ships with whatever possessions they could carry. Children crying for homes they'd never see again. Elders looking back at planets falling away into darkness. This is what happened when your predecessors decided we had no right to exist, Wyatt continued. These are my ancestors, real people with real lives, torn from everything they knew because the Dravish Empire wanted our resources and couldn't compete fairly. More images flowed past. The early sanctuary stations, crude constructions barely capable of sustaining life. Mass graves from the first decade when systems failed and thousands died. Memorial walls covered in names of those who never saw humanity survive. We spent the first century just trying not to go extinct. Half our population died in that time. Not from war, from desperation. From stations that failed. From diseases we couldn't treat. From children born too weak to survive in artificial environments. The broadcast showed technological progression. Better stations, improved life support, eventually thriving communities. But every achievement was marked by the weight of what had been lost. Every human alive today is descended from survivors who refused to give up. We could have become bitter. We could have spent 3,000 years planning revenge. Instead, we built. We explored. We found other species the Concordat had forgotten or displaced. We made alliances, friendships, families. Wyatt's expression hardened. But we never forgot the lost worlds. We never forgot the billions who died in the initial attack. We never forgot that we were erased from history, turned into myths, treated like we never existed. Every child in every sanctuary station grows up learning those names. Every human knows what it means to be unwanted. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. We didn't return for conquest. We returned because we have a right to exist. a right to reclaim the worlds that belong to our ancestors, a right to be recognized as real, not as legends or lies. The broadcast ended, leaving silence across the Concordat. In homes and workplaces, in government offices and military bases, beings absorbed what they'd seen. The human story wasn't abstract anymore. It had faces, names, history. Sethrak watched the broadcast from his disabled flagship and knew he was losing control of the narrative. Fear alone wouldn't be enough now. He needed a weapon that would force the Concordat to choose between humanity and survival itself. He activated a secure channel to his most trusted subordinate, Commander Vrath. Is the device ready? Yes, High Commander. Positioned in Sector 7 as ordered. If I give the activation code, how long before it becomes operational? 6 hours. Once activated, it cannot be stopped or recalled. Sethrak smiled coldly. Prepare the final contingency. If the Concordat chooses humans over loyalty to the Dravish Empire, they'll learn the cost of that choice. The device Sethrak referenced was a weapon developed in secret over decades, hidden from Concordat oversight. A stellar destabilization matrix capable of triggering catastrophic fusion reactions in multiple stars simultaneously. It was designed to sterilize entire systems, rendering them lifeless for millennia. Sethrak had positioned the device in the heart of the dead zone, aimed at the sanctuary stations that he broadcast his ultimatum on all frequencies, ensuring maximum impact. This is High Commander Sethrak to all Concordat forces and human vessels. I will now demonstrate why the Dravish Empire's warnings must be heeded. Technical schematics appeared on every screen, showing the weapon's capabilities and current targeting. This device can destroy the human sanctuary stations and everything within 50 light years. I have positioned it beyond your reach. If humanity does not withdraw from Concordat space within 24 hours, I will activate it. The transmission showed projections of the weapon's effects. Billions of deaths. Entire regions of space rendered uninhabitable. The complete annihilation of humanity's refuge. The choice is simple, Sethrak continued. Humanity leaves or humanity dies. Again, Rodriguez received the transmission aboard the Perseverance and immediately assembled his command staff. The weapon specifications were real. Sethrak wasn't bluffing about its capabilities. Can we disable it in 24 hours? Admiral Liu asked. No, the tactical officer replied. It's buried in the undercity of Memorian. Layers of shielding and security. Even if we sent every special forces team we have, they couldn't reach it in time. Then we evacuate the stations, Admiral Okonkwo suggested. Get everyone out of range. Rodriguez shook his head. The stations can't move that fast. Millions will be left behind. And even if we evacuated successfully, we'd be proving Sethrak right, showing that we can be threatened into submission. We'd be running again. Silence filled the command deck. Every officer knew what was at stake. Billions of human lives weighed against the principle they'd return to defend. What if we call his bluff? Wyatt suggested quietly. Sethrak is making threats because he's desperate. If he actually triggers that weapon, he destroys the archives. He destroys evidence of Dravish crimes. He commits genocide in front of the entire galaxy. You're betting billions of lives that he won't push the button, Lou said. No, Rodriguez interrupted, his expression grim. She's betting that Sethrak already pushed it, that he activated the weapon before making his threat, that he's planning to destroy everything regardless of what we do. Understanding dawned across the command deck. This wasn't an ultimatum. It was a distraction. Sethrak needed humanity focused on the threat while he prepared to execute them anyway. Give me Taurus, Rodriguez ordered. If that weapon is on Memorian, the archives might have information about its location. And we need to contact our operatives on the surface. What Sethrak didn't know was that humanity had spent weeks infiltrating Concordat worlds. Not with armies or fleets, but with small teams of specialists. Humans looked similar enough to dozens of Concordat species that simple disguises worked. They'd been gathering intelligence, making contacts, preparing for exactly this kind of contingency. One team was already on Memorian, embedded deep in the Undercity. They'd been searching for additional archive evidence when Sethrak made his broadcast. Now they had a new mission. Find the weapon, disable it, save billions of lives. And they had less than 24 hours to succeed. The Undercity of Memorian existed beneath layers of archives and administration, a forgotten maze of maintenance tunnels and abandoned infrastructure, perfect for hiding weapons that weren't supposed to exist. Agent Reeves led the human infiltration team through corridors that hadn't seen foot traffic in decades. Her team consisted of 5 specialists, each one trained for exactly this kind of operation. They moved silently, using equipment that masked their thermal signatures and fooled motion sensors. Towers sent updated schematics. Her communications specialist whispered, "The weapon should be in Section 42, Sublevel 15. The archives show unusual power consumption in that area dating back 6 months." Reeves nodded and adjusted their route. Time was their enemy now. 17 hours until Sethrak's deadline. Less if he decided to activate early. They descended deeper, passing through security checkpoints that had been remotely disabled by human hackers working from the fleet. Every system in Concordat space had vulnerabilities when you had 3,000 years to study them. Section 42 was a massive chamber that once housed cooling systems for the original archive complex. Now it contained the Dravish weapon, a horrific machine of destruction disguised as standard infrastructure. Reeves recognized the design immediately from the technical specifications Sethrak had broadcast. "How do we disable it?" her demolitions expert asked. Carefully, Reeves replied, "That thing is designed to resist tampering. One wrong move, and it triggers automatically." Above them, in the council chambers, the debate raged on. Brenna stood at the speaker's podium, facing down the Dravish delegation with evidence towers had compiled over weeks of research. "High Commander Sethrak has positioned a doomsday weapon in Concordat territory without authorization," she stated clearly. "This alone is grounds for immediate sanctions. Add his attempted genocide of the human species, both past and present, and the case for his arrest becomes overwhelming." The Dravish representative, Commander Vrath in Sethrak's absence, maintained his composure. "The weapon is purely defensive, positioned to protect the Concordat from human aggression by threatening to kill billions of civilians." Brenna's voice carried ice. "By positioning it to destroy archives containing evidence of your crimes. Necessary precautions in dangerous times." Taurus stepped forward, unable to remain silent. "I've studied every document in these archives. The Dravish Empire has spent 3,000 years rewriting history, erasing evidence, manipulating records. They turned humans into myths because truth was inconvenient. Now that truth has returned with warships and witnesses, they're trying to destroy it permanently." An archivist's interpretation, Vrath dismissed. "Not fact." "Then explain this." Taurus activated a holographic display, showing communications between Dravish commanders from 3,000 years ago. Their own words, planning genocide, celebrating the destruction of human colonies, discussing how to cover up their crimes. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species who'd supported the Dravish position began backing away, seeing clearly what their allies truly represented. The evidence was irrefutable, documented by the Dravish themselves, that in the Undercity, Reeves and her team worked frantically to disable the weapon. Each component had to be approached in specific sequence. One mistake would trigger the detonation protocol. "How much time?" she asked. 14 hours until deadline. "But I'm detecting activation sequences already running." Sethrak started the countdown early. Reeves cursed softly. "How long do we have?" "For hours, maybe 5. The weapon is warming up." They worked faster, bypassing safety protocols and disabling subsystems. Sweat dripped despite the cool underground air. Every second mattered. Rodriguez received updates from both fronts simultaneously. Brenna's political assault was working, turning council sentiment against the Dravish. But Reeves's team was running out of time. "Captain, we need to evacuate the stations," Admiral Okonkwo urged. "Even if it's incomplete, we have to try." "Not yet," Rodriguez replied, watching the countdown. We trust our people on the ground. For hours became 3. 3 became 2. The weapon continued its activation sequence, building toward the catastrophic release of energy that would sterilize 50 light-years of space. Then Reeves found it. The primary control node, buried deep in the weapon's core. Heavily shielded, multiply redundant, designed to be impossible to disable. She studied the configuration and made a decision. "I need you all to leave," she told her team. "Get to minimum safe distance. We're not abandoning you." Her second protested. "That's an order. This next part requires someone to be inside the shielding when it collapses. Manual override. One-person job." Her team hesitated, then reluctantly withdrew. They understood the math. One life to save billions. Reeves worked alone in the weapon chamber, dismantling fail-safes and bypass circuits. The activation countdown accelerated as the system detected tampering. She had minutes now, maybe less. She thought about the sanctuary stations above, filled with families who trusted her to protect them. She thought about children who'd grown up in exile, finally within reach of real worlds and natural sunlight. She thought about her own daughter, somewhere in the fleet, waiting to walk on Earth for the first time. The final circuit disconnected with a soft click. The weapon went dead, its countdown frozen at 47 seconds. Reeves slumped against the disabled machine, breathing hard, sending a 2-word message to Rodriguez: "Weapon disabled." In the council chamber, Vrath received the same information simultaneously. His expression crumbled as he realized Sethrak's final gambit had failed. Without the threat of the weapon, the Dravish had nothing left. Brenna seized the moment. "I move again for sanctions against the Dravish Empire and arrest warrants for High Commander Sethrak and all officers involved in both the historical genocide and this current attempt." This time, the vote passed. Overwhelmingly, Sethrak, still aboard his disabled flagship, watched his empire collapse in real time. Arrest teams were already moving to secure him. His subordinates were abandoning his cause. The truth he'd tried to bury for 3,000 years had destroyed everything he'd built. Rodriguez received confirmation of the vote results and allowed himself a small smile. Justice, finally, he broadcast to the human fleet. The Concordat Council has voted to grant humanity full member status. We're going home, all of us. Across the sanctuary stations, celebrations erupted. Families who'd lived their entire lives in artificial habitats would finally feel soil beneath their feet. Children would see real sunlight. The exile was over. 1 year later, Taurus visited Earth as part of a cultural exchange program. Rodriguez met him personally, taking him to the memorial gardens where every lost world was commemorated. Millions of names carved in stone. Billions of lives lost in the original genocide. Generations who died in exile without ever seeing home. "We didn't return for revenge," Rodriguez said quietly, running his hand across the carved names. "We returned to remember, to make sure the galaxy knows we existed. We were real. We mattered. The archives will preserve everything now," Taurus promised. "Every name, every story, every truth. Nothing will be erased again." Above them, ships from hundreds of species orbited Earth. Human vessels alongside Concordat craft, working together, building together. The dead zone was being filled with light again, colony ships returning to worlds that had waited 3,000 years for human footsteps. Rodriguez looked up at the sky, thinking about all those who died waiting for this moment. "We kept our promise," he whispered. "We came home." In the archives of Memorian, Taurus made one final entry in the official historical record: humanity, not a legend, not a myth. A warning to all who would try to erase truth. Silence is not death. Absence is not extinction. And justice, though delayed, will always find its way home.